Welcome to the Success Pick and Mix podcast with me, Nicky Raby. I began this conversation of success and its complexities in 2018. And over 500 episodes later, it seems there is a lot to say. So we talk about personal branding, money, mindset, marketing, reinvention, visibility, and doing what you love, making it real and making it happen. Because success isn't a straight line. It isn't the same for everyone, and it's constantly changing as we do. Here you'll find mini episodes joining me behind the scenes, plus interviews with some of the most exciting voices out there. I can't wait to share this with you. So don't miss an episode. Subscribe, rate, review, all the things. Oh, and one final thing. This isn't really about me. This is about you. Today can be that day that you start, and I can't wait to hear what is next for you. In today's episode, I am talking to Wendy Showell Nicholas, who is a psychotherapist, and she specializes in workplace well-being. I think it's such a prevalent topic at the moment, don't you? Hey, after the few years that we've had, to really assess how we're working and living and what we can do. Because I know that people say things like, just have a rest, just take the day off, book yourself a spa. But those I'm sure they're from a very sweet recommended place, but they're not always accessible. They're not always practical. They're not always a match for us at that time. So today's episode is about looking at what you can do. And Wendy kindly takes us through some pillars that you can refer back to, and also that you can take those pillars and make them work for you, make them meaningful for you. And so you can actually access them and reap the benefits as well. It's a really great one. Do feel free to grab a piece of paper and a pen or your phone. You might want to take some notes as well. I love Wendy. I know that you're going to love her Yorkshire warmth, and it just felt like I was having a cup of tea with a pal. So enjoy the episode. As always, come and have a chat with us. Let us know what you think. All of the details are in the show notes, and enjoy the episode. Wendy, good morning.
Good morning, Nicky.
How are you? Thanks so much for being on the podcast.
It is so lovely. The last time we spoke, we had no idea what was going to happen, and it feels like we've been saying forever we must have a chat on the podcast. So I'm really pleased that we are doing it.
Well, you were honestly the first person that I thought of, because I think we all need a bit of grounding and a bit of recalibration at this time of working out what's next. But before we start, I guess, tell everybody what you do, what you specialize in, and I guess what's brought you kind of to this moment. I mean, you don't need life history or medical backstory or anything like that, but just, a bit of context would be lovely to have.
Yeah, no, you definitely don't want my medical backstory, Nicky. That's not going to help anybody. I'm a psychotherapist. I started my career, I'm sort of dual profession. So I started as a social worker, but really had a preference for therapeutic work and spent a lot of my time doing therapeutic work. And as things changed in the profession, that was often less possible. So via a very circuitous route, doing teaching and all manner of things, mindfulness-based training, all those things. I'm now very comfortably seated firmly as a psychotherapist. And I I've my own practice, so members of the public who are adults can contact me for help. But I also work predominantly with professionals or people who have who deal with a lot of very difficult material, often through their jobs, sometimes in their lives as well, but who are dealing with very traumatic stuff. And I help people to stay okay while they're often helping other people.
Yes. That whole, when people say it so casually of fill up your own cup or, put your own life jacket on before somebody else's, but my goodness, that moment where you're on a plane and I'm taking R2 on a plane, I know that one of them will be like dangling somewhere at the same time. So to have that groundedness is not always as simple as just do it first for yourself. So I guess it's prominent to talk about it now, post. I don't even know if we're quite there yet with the pandemic, but as we ease into perhaps what we knew before, what's coming up for your clients and what conversations are you in at the moment?
I don't think we are post pandemic. I would definitely say that, and I think it impacts on people differently, Nikki. I'm seeing a really strange phenomenon where on the one side, people are often, not everyone, so I'm really generalizing here, and also commenting a little bit on what I see more widely in society. On one level, I think people had this enforced pause where they were able to recalibrate, they were able to see things that really mattered to them and didn't matter to them, and maybe sometimes rethink how they worked, how they lived, which relationships were important, all of those things. So I think there's some real intention for people to be able to hold on to some of that and keep that sense of direction whilst the world is opening up. On the other hand, I think in a very confusing way, I am seeing an awful lot of people in crisis now, more than in the pandemic, actually. And my pet theory is that it's partly cumulative. That people have just been hanging on for so long in survival mode, and we're not good as humans. We don't love unpredictability to that extent. And of course, these threats that have been there that have really what we would call almost existential threats, and there are things that change, that it was like saying the sun is not going to rise tomorrow. Who thought we wouldn't be having Christmas or Eid, or that those things that were affected were quite profound. And at the time, I think we go into just adapt and survive mode, and people manage in that way. But when they settle down, then you settle down a little bit, and it's like, it's like running away from the tiger. If you've got a predator chasing you, you just concentrate on getting through it and surviving. But then maybe when you get back, that's when your body starts registering what's happened, and you might be really shaken. And this period now, I think a lot of people are really shaken, and that's quite confusing to them because there's this message that the world's gone back to normal. So for some people, they don't even recognize why they feel like this. So is that does that make sense, Nikki?
Yeah, it does, because I think it's also a real assessment of, I guess, what's been going on in terms of the rules, even though we've known that they have not always been adhered to, or have been ever changing. But also it's really, I think, made us think about, what do those rules mean to us, and where do we sit within that? And that sense of, okay, you now never have to wear a face mask again. Well, okay, well, what does that mean? And am I comfortable with being able to see people's teeth again, or being that close, or that sense? And I know, this is something very trivia, but sometimes we've all been to those parties or get-togethers where people say, I'm going now, and you're like, oh no, this person's going to want to kiss you or hug you, and you're like, oh, I really don't want. And now it's quite nice where you're just like, oh no, they might not, because of what's been going on. But I think that revealing of that, where we are up to, I think it's been very, I guess one word I would use is very exposing. I feel that a lot of us have seen things about ourselves, maybe, or about our lives, that it's very difficult to unsee now.
Yes. And that, again, that for some people, things that have really pleasantly surprised them, and some maybe not so much. And I think as a society, you really hit the nail on the head there, Nikki, this idea of how it impacts on people differently. And we all had to get used to accepting, well, I think people tried to get used to accepting that people respond differently. People have different anxiety levels. People are more comfortable than others in certain situations. And the rules were not always consistent and clear enough for people to just follow orders. And so we were in this position where a really strong message, and early on, I think to some extent we've forgotten this, but we did not know what we were dealing with.
No.
Literally, there was a point at which we thought maybe if the postman comes and I open the door, that might be a life-threatening event, and we just didn't know that was the case. So this idea that in those situations it's much more comfortable for us to just follow a rule, and then we can cross with the people who don't follow it, and that makes us feel secure. We can just follow the rule, but it was much more complicated than that. So we all had to learn to do what we thought was right in the right given situation, adhering to the rules, but also thinking about sometimes the rules didn't match the risk, especially when they changed and you were thinking, well, hold on, the rules mean I'm more vulnerable. And, it's really hard for people. So I think that was difficult, to having to take personal responsibility.
Absolutely. And I do remember in March, because we had a family wedding planned in the March, and then, very quickly it sort of became apparent, in the May, very apparent, like, oh, this is probably not going to happen, or at least it's going to be postponed. And then I think it was my dad said, oh yes, we're likely to be like this until June. And I remember looking at him like I would have done when I was 14, like, as if you're right, Dad, like, June, what are you talking about? And oh my gosh, we just, as you say, we had no idea what was around the corner. In terms of perhaps positives that have come, what sort of come to the surface, and what has been maybe perhaps it can no longer be ignored? What do people now know much more?
I can't speak for everyone. I think generally one of the things that I'm seeing that people learned about themselves, there were very simple things. So now, as people are trying to remain well with their jobs, they're not surprised by, if I'm saying to them, it would be a great well-being activity if you could just get a few minutes outdoors each day in daylight. That's going to be really good for your brain. And they know that now. People have had that experience, that actually their lives slowed down enough to, if they were really fortunate enough to live somewhere they could go out in nature, they knew that helped them and that it really benefited them. They knew, I think people have really valued quality of relationship, and having the fact that you couldn't be with people that you really loved and that made you feel that your life was rich.
Yes.
That, I think people really, really value that now. And conversely, I think people realise that some of their social interactions that were obligations that they were doing, that really put a pressure on them and detracted from the relationships that they valued, I think they felt better about stopping them.
Yes.
Not entirely cutting people out or being unkind, but prioritising differently and feeling better about saying no to a social occasion that they don't really want to go to.
That sense of, well, we've always done it, so we'll just carry on as always. It made people stop. And I was that kid who had always had their head between the banisters, or used to love going to my nana's friend's house because I'd be able to earwig and like listen to adult conversation. But the amount of times where you would hear those conversations of like, we all go there for Christmas Day, and then on Boxing Day they all come to us, and I think people suddenly thought, I don't want to sit on their sofa, I've never wanted to sit on their sofa, and it's now time to think about things. How's it changed in terms of the way that people view work, or as you mentioned, the individuals that you work with? Is there a new set of circumstances that are coming into play here?
I think for a lot of the individuals I work with, it's been much tougher because of the cumulative effect, and often they kept working through this pandemic, and of course they were working with really vulnerable people or people who were in absolute crisis and very difficult situations, so they're tired. There's a real sense of being tired, of no break or respite before starting again, if that makes sense. It's like you've just come through a pandemic and you're on your knees, and then you've just got to go back to doing it all in person and live.
Yes.
And there's no sense, like you didn't get a holiday in that time, or you didn't get the day-to-day things that would build your resilience. Well, and I'm talking about professionals there who work with really, really difficult situations, lawyers, police officers, social workers, teachers have really had it through this, but because they've been a jack of all trades. They've been trying to do everything. But also I would put in that camp mums and people who have just, like, you don't actually have a choice. You still have to look after the 3-year-old. And sometimes that's in a flat in the middle of the London where you haven't had access to green space for some of that time. It's been really difficult. So people who've just had to keep looking after others through this situation, or people with parents who they've been concerned about their health, I think they're exhausted.
Yeah.
Like absolutely exhausted. And I think there's it's not intentional, but the message that everything's back to normal now is incongruent, because they don't feel back to normal. They probably feel a bit worse and a bit more tired. And I suppose some of my job at the moment is really pointing that out, that of course you're not back to normal. This has been so tiring and challenging, and that, in all things balance, you have to compensate for that. So you have to up your self-care and your focus on maintaining your own well-being. You just have to do that, or it is going to go wrong. And sometimes, Nicky, I think people just come to me to be told off. To be told, like, just, you absolutely have to do this. But we know it. We know that instinctively that we should be doing that. But there are all these other messages, big, strong social messages, that make us feel bad about caring for ourselves. And that we're always, we're not tabula rasa. We're always working against that. Not just social message, family messages, how we think about ourselves. That all those things can get in the way of doing the right thing.
And I do feel, especially in the online space, there was a real conversation around doing more, being more, and even the language of like smashing it and going for it and hustling harder. And I think for most people, that is not the way that they want to be, in that constant fight or flight situation of like, oh my gosh, I've got to turn it around. And I've got young children as well, and that pressure to be able to go, right, I'm going to go to the gym for 4 hours, and you're like, no, that is not going to be the way that I access the best version of myself. You mentioned sort of going out into green space there, and like in terms of keeping it very simple, of those sort of self-care exercises. I know people talk about, going shopping or going to a spa, and that's not sort of necessarily accessible for most people on a day-to-day basis. But if you talk about those little and often things, what sort of springs to mind that you found to really work for yourself and for people that you work with?
Well, actually, is it okay, Nick, if I just go back to something you said and then build on it to answer that?
Definitely, yeah.
I think you're 100% right about that. The mixed message that we see on social media and in life in general, and that we need to be smashing it all the time. And one thing that I do work in a mixed way, so that I don't feel like I am the expert in everything, and that I know more. I know a lot about my field, but sometimes that's not my private property. I can share that with you. So sometimes just what we would call neuroeducation, just letting people know that, and I'm sorry if this contradicts some fabulous people out there who are really public about how they try to encourage people to live their best life and all those things, but what we know is it doesn't work doing it like that. So being on all the time smashing it all the time will not lead to anything good. Our brains are not set up like that, and our bodies are not set up like that. So we know that in order to be effective and efficient, and all those words that people want to be when they're the kind of person who wants to smash it, we actually have to have a resting period for our brain as well. So we have to be able to concentrate for intense periods, i.e. work, put our effort into something, but then genuinely be able to bring ourselves into a resting state. And what we tend to do is we book a 2-week holiday, or we book a spa break, like you're saying, but that doesn't make any sense. You can't work for all those weeks in the year and then be working in the evenings or accessing Instagram, or still stimulating yourself every evening and every weekend and being on basically all the time, and then expect to just stop for 2 weeks. I often use the analogy of a marathon runner, not that I've ever run for further than a bus, but if I was a marathon runner, I understand that they train and then they do the marathon, but they don't just stop the next day.
Yeah.
And never do anything again. They cool down, they do shorter runs and they get used to it. But we do the equivalent of we work, and then just stop, and we're all supposed to have rest in this weekend or this holiday. Just doesn't work like that. We just physically, that is not how we are made. So the things that we need to do need to be mindful and deliberate and a daily practice. And, as humans, I'm really cautious about saying, it would be really helpful for you to do these things, because when we are in that doing mode, that real smashing it mode, which I promise you, Nicky, I absolutely understand. My weakness is toward overworking, which is why my interest is in that area. I've learned a lot about it. When we're in that mode, we can punish we can make anything into a chore.
Yes.
So we can make our well-being practices into a chore. And I do have people, in the past I've innocently done a seminar talking about, avoiding vicarious trauma or stress reduction. And I'll have some just amazingly brilliant person come up to me, and they're great, but they'll say, "Oh, Wendy, I did what you said. I get up 2 hours early now, and I do an hour's yoga, and I go for a run, and then I make my macrobiotic vegan meal." And I'm like, "Oh, I swear, I don't think I said that. That feels really exhausting." It's like harder work. And of course, you can fail at that, and you're just adding more things to do and more pressure. So I suppose what I would say is all of those things I've just quoted, moving your body, getting some exercise, eating food that's going to make you feel comforted. And sometimes that is a macrobiotic vegan diet, but sometimes it's lying on the sofa eating a bacon sandwich, watching Harry Potter, because you just need some comfort, and that's okay as well. It might include those things, but the ingredient that's really necessary is self-compassion. So this sense that you're doing them all in a very intuitive way. So what do I need now? So it's not really prescriptive. There are some things that we know are quite prescriptive. We know there are 5 areas that if we get those things each day, that's going to generally enhance our well-being. And I always remember 4, Nicky, but I'm going to, because I haven't written any notes.
It's fine.
Any notes. But they are learn. And by learn, I don't mean, again, a punishing schedule of learning, I don't know, for your bar exam or something, but something that is almost for no purpose, but which will get you into that flow state of enjoyment. So it might be that you learn a new recipe, or you learn to crochet, or you learn a different language, or, something that's for pleasure, it's for your satisfaction. So learn is a good one. Connect is the next one, and that is really about real human connection and deliberateness of connection. And again, that does not need to be big things. That can be, if you are standing in a queue at the post office and our inclination is to get our phone out and check our phone, but what if you didn't? What if you smiled at the person at the side of you, or something like that? That's a connection. You start a conversation with someone. I come from Yorkshire, so this is not difficult everywhere you go.
But if somebody was on the phone, they're like, why is that woman on her phone? What's she doing?
They'd kind of be okay with you being on the phone, but they'd chat to you as soon as you put the phone down. Sometimes while you've got the phone in your hand, they would still talk to you. If you go for a run where I live, you have your headphones, you'll get people writing in saying she's parodying Yorkshire people, but I am one. If you've got headphones in and you're clearly running and listening to something, somebody will still stop you and say hi. They might not even know you. Do you know what's this happening here, or where this is? Or you're just like, really clearly I'm doing something else. So we don't have a problem with chatting to people. So connect is a good one. Give. So to give to others is really good for us. We, as humans, we need to be connected to groups of people. And part of what gels us like that is mutual reliance. The fact that we, it's not because we are the fastest animal on the planet, or we have the sharpest teeth, and that is not why we've evolved as successfully as we have. Cooperation is why we've evolved, because when we figured out that actually if a gang of us all get up on some high ground and we roll a boulder onto the scary predator, not only will we have defeated the predator and our threat will have gone, we might eat for a week as well. And so then there's this, we have to be able to reciprocate help. So this idea that if somebody stays there and cooks a fire and keeps the homestead safe, and we go out and get the food, then this reciprocity is hardwired for humans. So now we don't work in quite that way, but we do like to belong. We do like to feel that we are part of something, that we're in the tribe. That is a real sense of security for us. And we want to feel we contribute to the tribe as well. So the idea of being able to give is important to us. And also to be able to receive is important for different reasons, which I won't labour on about, but giving. And I really think almost moving away from the idea of not so much giving that is like paying tithes, a contribution of your income to a charity, for example, but the kind of giving that is about human connection. So this giving somebody your attention, back to the post office, giving somebody your attention. I give much to my children's mortification compliments quite easily. So if I see someone in the street who's just got the most fabulous pair of red trousers on, I'm gonna stop and say, you just look amazing in those red trousers. And of course my kids are like, oh my God, you don't even know that person. Walking. But it's a lovely thing to do. It feels great for me to have seen something fabulous and to be able to go, look, we have this shared appreciation of this fabulous thing you've done. And I feel like it probably feels pretty good to them as well, for somebody to notice that they chose brilliant red trousers. That's a form of giving. So what have we had, Nicky? Connect.
Learn,
give, note. So note, and that is really connected to being in the moment. And now it's quite popular to describe that as mindfulness practice. So it could be develop a mindfulness practice and do that regularly. And it's like using a muscle. It just helps you to be in the here and now and be aware of what your state it is and what's going on. But it doesn't have to be sitting on a cushion doing that. It could be, I really encourage people to stop during their day. And I don't know why I always put my hand on my chest when I do this. It's a kind of physical anchor. And then I find people copy me, but that's not necessary. But stop and kind of just ask yourself, what do I need now? Yes. Several times a day, I will stop and do that. And that also, it's a very simple form of mindfulness, because you're coming out of your head. Some of it is in your head. You might need a rest from what you're thinking about, but some of it is very physical. So this sense of like scanning your body and your brain and thinking, what do I need? And you know what, Nicky, sometimes that's like you need to go to the loo, and you started the morning thinking, I really need a wee, and then you fed the child and you answered the calls and you did the emails and it's lunchtime and you still haven't been that way.
I find that I do it a lot with my 2-year-old who's nearly 3, and she's in that expressive, let's call it expressive stage, where the words are all coming faster, and they're in that state sometimes of just trying to get out really quickly, but they're not always easy to understand. And she gets so frustrated. And one of the questions that I've said, what do you need? Can you show mummy? Or sometimes I can see it in her body that she can't almost feel grounded or settled. And randomly, I just said to her the other day, do you want to go and lie on your bed for a minute? And then she looked at me with just such delight, like, yes, that's exactly what I want to do. And it was with no, I know back in the day it would have been like, right, go to your room, go and lie down, go and do that. But there was no shame with it there. It was just like, gosh, you need to feel there's something nurturing that you need here, just to take a moment out of this situation. And maybe she just didn't want to be watching The Chase like my 6-year-old.
But that's such a beautiful example, because I think something people really struggle with when they think about self-care, and obviously it's more than these things, but these things are a great start. When we think about that, especially for mums, we've got this sense that it's somehow selfish, or it's that to be a good mum, to be a good carer, or to be a good friend. I think it's quite a female perspective, not always, but my instinct is my experience is it's quite a female phenomenon. Is that you should feel some sense of shame about prioritizing your well-being. But what you've done there is I would always argue that children will, and other people, they will kind of hear a bit of what you say, but most of the time we sound like the Snoopy adults. It's just wah, wah, wah. They don't hear any of it, but they really, really see what you do.
Yes.
So we want our children to grow up knowing that actually, instead of going into that really wired red zone where I'm having a tantrum because I'm a toddler and I don't know what's happened, my synapses have just gone off, they've just gone offline, and I found myself screaming and distressed on the floor. We want them to be able to look to an adult and see a very gentle modeling of, sometimes I don't know what's wrong with me, so I step out for a while, I lie down, or I do this thing. And you've given her some words there. She didn't know that's what she needed. So but you have an adult experience, so you can draw on more. You've got more frame of reference, so you can make us some suggestions until one hits home. And when you said, do you want to lie down? She's like, oh my, yeah, that is the thing I wanted to do. And of course, that feels right to do that for our children, but we get out of the habit of doing it for ourselves, Nicky, and then we're rubbish role models. So I would turn that on its head and say, actually, you cannot give to others to a greater extent than you can give to yourself. That's just not possible. Parents hate me saying that, and a lot of professionals who give everything to their job hate me saying that, because there's a sense of, but I would lie down under a bus for my child, or for this, I would give everything for this cause. But the truth is, we would do those big gestures, but on a daily basis, all the things that we carry with us, the judgments that we push ourselves harder, that we have a lot of self-judgment, it can't help but spill out. It can't help but spill out. And then the people we're caring for see that. They see that there's a bit of holdback, or there's a bit of resentment, or there's a bit of that this is conditional. I will do this, but then I expect you to behave like that. Whereas when we really learn this self-compassion and to check in with ourselves and ask ourselves, what do you need? And we do that comfortably, this fills us up, and we are much more able to give to others without those kind of conditions that we're not even aware of. I feel like I've just gone really deep there, Nicky.
Well, we're in that deep place, aren't we, of going, what are we doing, and how do we do this? And something that just came to mind there when you said that is that because my daughter is 2, how I'm expecting her to be able to, well, and I'm not, but you know, within that conversation throughout it, there could be this expectation of her having to figure out the emotions that she's feeling. Well, we've just learned colors and numbers, so for her to have some profound statement of this is what I feel, this is what I need, like that's coming, but it's not there just yet. But that sense of guilt around taking time for yourself, and one of the things is, bizarrely, it's okay to go and get your hair done, or go and get, you know, all those old things of go and buy yourself something nice, a pretty dress or makeup or something frivolous. It's all outside stuff that is acknowledged, but if you say that you need something for inside, it brings other emotions up.
Yes, and you know, there are different lenses to look at that through, aren't there? And some people would say, well, this outside stuff is still making other people comfortable. It's about looking pretty to be pretty to look at, and it's looking, you know, all those things are still in a way for other people. We're still presenting ourselves for other people. But to say, do you know what, I just want to let the hair on my chin grow and lie on this sofa feeling a bit glum. It's not massively. You don't get the Instagram posts about that, do you?
No,
it's not a thing. We should start that, Nicky.
Yeah, and you know what? The biggest pieces of growth that I've ever done have not been Instagram friendly, and not even in a sort of being able to show up and share the lessons, because it's almost that moment, like when you're in it, all you can do is simply be in it, experiencing and being there, and that pressure to sort of document it and share your learning lessons at the same time, you just can't physically do it, because we don't have a camera crew following us around all day, nor should we.
No, and it's two different modes of being as well. So it's great to do the creative stuff and put things out there and have that. But as long as we're all really clear that that is what we're looking at, you know, and I really train myself. There's a few people, they're not high profile people at all. They're just often, actually, it's families. So it's women who I know a little bit, so not enough to see them ugly crying at the kitchen table the day, you know, the normal stuff that you see with your friends, but I know them enough and say hi, and I think they look great, and their families just seem adorable, and everything on Instagram just looks so amazing. And I've really trained myself to admire their Instagram feed and to really tell myself, do you know, and when I see them, I'll go, oh, do you know, I just love watching your Instagram feed. I love what you put up there. It's so beautiful. But that is what I'm admiring.
Yes.
It's not their life.
Yeah.
And that's important to me, that I remind myself, and I encourage other people to remind themselves that it is a beautiful thing to admire somebody's wonderful photography, and the fact that their kids will even cooperate. I have one photo that I don't even know if I don't think it's on social media. I'll have to find it and put it on. I remember watching this brilliant artist in our area. He's just the loveliest man, a wonderful artist, and his children are homeschooled, and his wife is an amazing artist, and they make beautiful things like backpack. It's just look on Instagram, and I admire them so much, and it's so beautiful. And they put any resources they have into traveling with their children, you know, going out there and being in the country and in the world. It's just amazing. And this summer I watched their Instagram feed and was blown away and envious. You know, I was looking, thinking, oh my goodness, why am I not doing those things? Why are those? I literally had one photograph, and it was of none of my children on it. I've got 4 and 2 grandchildren, apart from the youngest, who was about 9 at the time, who is laid prostrate on the floor outside a 1970s caravan that we like in the 80s, not even one of the cool caravans, like a beige 1980s caravan. And she's laid on the floor with a sparkly raincoat, literally with her face in the mud, sobbing because we suggested we go for a walk. It wasn't even like a hike.
It sounded like she needed to lie on her bed.
She's just like, what is wrong with you? Why would you say that? What if people see me walking?
Isn't that true though? When people do that, we're going on another trip and you might see a picture of them going to the airport. But I just thought, oh my God, like even to get everybody out of the house or packed or to have passports or everybody's weed, or like I had to take the children. We went away the other weekend and Matt wasn't with me. He was meeting us there. And it was even, and even our suitcase had gone ahead with my mum. But it's still, snacks and getting to the train station and all the rest of it. And then my daughter, just as we were about to leave, decided to try the lock on the bathroom door for the first time. And I just thought, oh my, like this was not in the plan.
And this is what we're up against. So that, and I know those families have those days and they know they're not pretending, but they're just really good at, they're creatives, they've got beautiful photography skills, their family are more interested in having their photograph. You're making me laugh because I'm thinking, I once sent two of my children are twins and I sent them to school and they were in little school. And this is really awful, and possibly I might regret sharing it as well. But I sent them into school. They must have been about 5, and just bent down to kiss one of them, and the most awful smell came from it, like just an awful smell. And I was like, "What the heck have you done?" And he just he was like, "What?" I went, "Your hair's wet, Gabriel. Your hair's damp." And he said, well, the greatest skill a Jedi has, this is what his brother had told him, is to wee higher than his own head. So what they'd done that morning was to just play at weeing higher than your own head. And I was like, I dropped them off. So he's damp with his own wee on his way into school. I had people waiting at work, and God forgive me, I just sent him in, Nicky. It just was like, just don't ask any questions or have the teacher come near you don't draw attention to yourself at all.
Just take yourself to the other side of the room.
Be quiet and sit in a corner all day. That's awful, isn't it? But that's my kind of morning.
It is though, but that's real life. It's about it, and that's what we take into our work as creators as well, is experimenting and fun and playfulness, and sometimes that involves we.
It does involve we, and for the parents of those children for whom it involves we, it also means that it's probably not realistic to have a really punishing well-being routine in amongst that, because it's just not going to work. No. So this idea of knowing the things that are probably, rather than a real scattergun approach, knowing that there are areas that you could look at which are probably going to tick boxes, most of which I've mentioned. The last one is move, and I'll come to that. But also doing it as and when you can and with some compassion. So there's really no such thing as failure with self-care, because that would be beyond ironic, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
So this real sense of going into it like that, thinking, do you know what, if today I choose to not cook a beautiful meal for my children, but to eat leftovers from yesterday and lie down watching whatever I want to watch with them, just going for the easy life, then that might be some self-care for me. And it might be nice, it might be fine for them. They might be fine with it. And
that all smile on my face this morning when I opened the fridge, because I realised yesterday that Matt had already bought a pizza for the children's dinner, because one of them's got football tonight, the other one's going to be tired from nursery. And I just thought, I don't have to cook like that. I mean, that's true romance, really, to be honest.
It really is.
But one thing I was going to say is when I did a yoga class the other day, the guy said, let something go. And I'm sure some people let some farts go and some snot go and all the rest of it. But it was a really interesting exercise, because as a coach, I'd go, what could I let go? And articulate it and analyze it. But I just had to get into my body. And I was like, oh, wow, I'm really clenching my jaw today. And that sense of just checking in and that mindfulness was like, oh, why do I always do that? Or can I just smile a bit more? Oh, that, and it's those small details. It was profound, I tell you.
It's really profound. And sometimes in therapy, I will ask that. I will ask, sometimes some of our experiences is pre-verbal. The stuff that we're holding on to is wired in us from before we spoke, or it happened to us on a level that's hard to articulate. It happened on a really visceral level. And that might be accumulated stress. It might be baggage we're holding, all the things. And so when we ask people to talk about it, and I am a talking therapist, but sometimes that it's like asking your daughter what she needs when she's having the meltdown. They don't have the words because it isn't a word thing. And so sometimes I'll ask them, where do you notice something in your body? And then they will say, oh, I noticed that my breathing is there's a real tightness around this shoulder and I'm really holding my jaw in this way. And then to keep asking, well, is this a familiar thing? In this way, people can see, actually, this is quite common when I've got this kind of event coming up, or this is something I always did in the past when this was happening in my life. And it's a very physical way of finding your way to what is happening for you. And you use the word profound, but sometimes that can be really profound because our brains and our bodies are not that false dichotomy between our brain and body. It just is a false dichotomy. Everything, the chemicals that we kick out of our brain are affecting our body and vice versa. We know from the gut brain axis that there's messages going the other way now, and increasingly we're finding out more about how that works. But it feels very old-fashioned now, I think, to me anyway, to just keep the two quite separate.
Yes.
So sometimes we know things about ourselves because we have this beautiful brain that can articulate and find words to match experience. But sometimes it's because we have a sensation and there's something about how we're holding our body and what's happening in our body that is telling us, there's some danger there, or there's some effort there, or there's something I'm concerned about there and I'm holding myself ready for an attack. But you're not always conscious of that until you go into yourself.
Yeah. And sometimes it's the thing, it feels exposing, so you don't want to do the thing, so you get even deeper and tighter in the stuckness. But actually, if you can let it go, it's a beautiful thing. Where can people find more about your work and what you do? And I know that this conversation is going to resonate with so many people.
Well, I'd love to say I've got the most fabulous social media following and platform and all the glamorous things, but it's a bit rubbish. But if you want to look, you can find me on Instagram at Showell Nicholas. And I do have a website as well. So my name is Wendy Showell Nicholas. If you Google Showell Nicholas, the website will come up, and then you can get to things from there. And there's a couple of mindfulness practices as well on one of the pages that people can download on there if they want to take some time for themselves in the note area. They're free, and if you can cope with my really Yorkshire accent, that you can find other versions with beautiful California accents if you want. But if you want to access that, those are there, so they're a nice start for a bit of me time.
Amazing. Oh, well, you know that I adore you and I think that you're wonderful. And I know there's going to be many moments where people today will take something and let something go as well, and just make it manageable. I think that's what you've really done today, is that it feels that things are possible. Because, when I know myself, when I get in that stuck situation, I can go no, and actually it's just a little wiggle or a shuffle towards a better version or a shift in some way. So we would love to know what you think, so do get in touch as well.
Do, and drop me a line, Nicky. I'm genuinely, it's all about relationship for me, so I'm really happy for people. There's never any, I don't really have that much to tell. There's no hard set. It's literally, if people just had a question or wanted to make a comment or ask me something, I am genuinely always really happy to do what I can to signpost you in the right direction, answer things. That's good for me. That's my connection and giving and all those things.
Amazing. Thank you so much.
You're lovely. Thank you, Nicky, for having me. What a treat.
You're welcome. Thank you so much for listening to today's episode. I really hope you got something from it. And if you did and would like to share, feel free to tag me across social media at Nicky Raby, or you can email hello@nickyraby.com. You can also go to my website, nickyraby.com, to find out more about how I can support you, sessions, courses, prices, availability, etc. Oh, and there's loads of freebies to get you started. Another episode will be with you shortly, but in the meantime, do rate, review and subscribe, and I will see you soon.